Hello and welcome to the I Can Do podcast with Benjamin Lee. We're here to talk about tips and strategies to have an I Can Do mindset when it comes to faith, family, fitness, and food. Let's go. Here's your host, Benjamin Lee.
Hello and welcome. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of I Can Do. I'm Benjamin Lee. I'm really excited today. I maybe a couple of weeks ago decided that I wanted to begin to interview people. This is something that is new to me. And one of the individuals that I wanted to talk to is here with us today. His name is Keith Stonehart. Keith and I had an opportunity to meet. We haven't officially met. We're looking at each other right now in the video, but we have been talking, I guess, at least for the last year, and we've been Facebook friends. And I heard about Keith a number of years ago. So Keith has a really powerful story that caught my attention, and I wrote a book last year, and he was able to be a part of it. So wanted to reach out to him, and he agreed to be a part of the show. Keith, how are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
I am doing good. How are you guys holding up there in Alabama with everything going on with the coronavirus?
Well, there's a little bit of panic mode going on, with a lot of folks. I mean, fortunately, my wife and I are pretty much kind of homebodies anyway, so things haven't really changed much for us, and it's good having everyone home, and so we're enjoying that. But I think like most Christians, we're trying to adjust to still be able to worship, to still find a way, and there's a lot of questions and things that are up in the air. And as every week rolls around, we're having to, try to adapt and follow scripture best we can. So that part of it is a little nerve wracking, but all in all, man, we're doing well. Blessed.
Yeah, that's good. I woke up, I was telling you earlier before we got started, I went to Walmart this morning. I heard about what they're doing now. They're keeping track of how many people go in at a single time. So after, at least here in Texas, so after there's a counter at the door, there's only one entrance now to go into. So I asked the woman how many people are going to be able to come in at a time. So she said about 1,000. And then once people leave, then the next person can go in. So I think I was in the early hundreds with respect to customers, but it certainly is changing quite a bit. And, we're just trying to take it one day at a time. Keith, I know that you and I are very similar in the sense that both of us have been preaching the gospel for a number of years and just learning a little bit more about your background. I have a lot of things I really want to talk to you about.
Okay.
I definitely want to talk to you about your band career and the guitars that are in your office there.
Yes.
One of the things let's talk about that now. Tell us, how did you get into playing the guitar?
Well, I actually started playing the drums at a really young age. I think, I grew up in the age of MTV, when MTV actually still played music videos. And, I can remember, I think, now obviously we didn't have cable, right? I mean, cable was like still an option then. And we didn't have cable, so I didn't have MTV. So I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old the first time I saw a music video. And I was just enamored with what was going on there. I had my earliest memories were my brother had Kiss albums, right? And he had one of the Kiss albums. It was Kiss Alive 2, and they're all on the cover, and there's fire, and there's smoke, and they're in these crazy costumes and this makeup, But I was just, I would stare at that picture for hours, just wondering what they were doing. I was so enamored with it. So getting to see a music video for the first time, I remember the first video that I saw was Survivor, Eye of the Tiger, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just blown away watching the guys play the instruments. And so I knew I was interested in that. And so then I would go to my friend's house who had cable, and we would watch MTV, in the afternoons. And I picked up a pair of chopsticks and started trying to mimic what they were doing in the videos. The drummer was, And I knew that my right foot on the bass drum made this sound, and my left foot on the hi-hat made this sound, and the snare drum made this sound, and my right hand was doing this. And so I could mimic what they were doing. And so I really believed, I was like, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I can play these drums. All I need are some drums, right? So, obviously at 9 years old, I began asking my parents for drums, and I was met with a very resounding no. We do not want drums. I mean, they're loud. You don't know how to play. And I was just like, no, I do know how to play. I promise. And it was always no. So a couple years go by, and I'm in the 5th grade, and my dad was a guitar player. And so I had grown up with that element in the house already. And I could play his guitar a little bit. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew I could make sounds, and I knew what sounded good and what sounded bad, but I had no idea what I was doing. But he had gone to the music store to get some strings for his guitar, and he would always go in there and hang out with the guys behind the counter, and they would talk music and all this stuff. And so I was just milling around. And of course, I go to the drum section of this big music store in Atlanta called a Music Mart. It was before Guitar Centers were big and all this. Music Mart was like an Atlanta-owned music store, and they had it was like a grocery store size, a small grocery store size. And the drum section was all the way in the back, and it was like a soundproofed area. So they had drum sets set up that you could play on. And they were all through the whole store. They would always be, piping music through the store. Well, just so happens that In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins was playing, right?
Nice, yeah.
We all know the part, right, where the drums
right.
come in. And so I sat there behind the drum set, and I just waited for that part to come in. And when it did, I just closed my eyes and I went for it, and I played along with the rest of that song.
Wow.
And I can't say that I played it flawlessly, but I played it pretty good for a 10-year-old who had never played the drums in real life, only with chopsticks on Tupperware, And whenever I open my eyes, I'm surrounded by all these people. And my dad is standing there, and his jaw is on the floor, and he's like, when did you learn to play the drums? I'm like, I told you I could play the drums, And so I got drums for Christmas. And so I started playing the drums then. And then my parents divorced between 8th and 9th grade. And there's a whole saga that goes with that. But, the summer between my 8th and 9th grade year, we were in a new house, new neighborhood. I didn't know anybody. I had my drums, and my brother played guitar. And so one morning before he went to work, he showed me how to play 3 chords. He showed me how to play an E, an A, and a D. And I sat there all day. I think when he left for work, it was like 7:30 in the morning. He got home at about 5 that afternoon, and I was still playing. And I had learned how to play all these different songs with those 3 chords, and so it just kind of began my love affair with it then, and it became something that just consumed me. And because of our situation, and because of a lot of the things that went on leading up to my parents' divorce and whatnot, music kind of became a saving grace for me, because I was very drawn to escapism, right? And obviously that would lead later on into, drug and alcohol use and eventually abuse and addiction. But for as long as I can remember since then, music has been a constant. And it was always the thing that could kind of pull me out of that and keep me somewhat between the ditches. But eventually that swerved and I got off track. But to this day, I play guitar every day. I play my drums, at least once a week. That's in behind me. And it's something that keeps my sanity. Music, lifting weights, and the Lord. Those are the 3 things that keep me in between the ditches and focused on my wife and my family and what's important.
Yeah, no, I love that, and we definitely have a lot of similarities together. One of the reasons why I wanted you to be on the show, Keith, my motto is I can do, so can you. And you definitely have an I can do attitude. I know you've been through a lot. It sounds like you've kind of touched on a couple of those things, and I wanted to see if we could talk about that, because I think your story can really help other people who are listening to this as well, where I focus quite a bit on faith, family, fitness, and food. And I know those are really big components of your life as well. I played the trumpet back in high school. I was not as diligent as you are. My son plays the guitar, so I'm definitely going to have to show him
Oh yeah.
the electric guitars that you have. You mentioned a little bit about how playing the guitar was kind of like a way for you to escape. And I know you talked a little bit about your parents and how they got divorced. I know that can be a really big deal. I wanted to see if you might be able to share some of that story with us of some of those
Sure.
things you were trying to escape. One of the things that has just stood out to me, Keith, just getting to know you more. I wrote a book for those who are listening called What to Do When You Go to College, a brutal analysis of my mistakes. And so it's really all about live and learn, or learn and live. So
Yeah.
there's different ways that we can live our lives. Hopefully we're living our lives where we are learning from God's word. But I do know many times, including myself, we often will learn and live. But one of the thoughts that really stood out to me when Keith shared his story in this book, and he shared his story for the purpose of college students or high school students being able to read this and to have a story of what people have gone through and the right path, and how to respond to the good news of Jesus Christ, and the fact that God really does love each and every one of us. But the phrase you mentioned, there is nowhere good to begin my story, and there's no good way to tell it. I'm not a very good writer. I think you did a great job with it. And yet I determined when I entered ministry that for the glory of God, I would keep nothing back because of the grace of God. So that really impressed me, because I know it's hard for people to kind of share their story. Yeah. There's guilt, there's shame. People sometimes don't want other people to know some of the things that they have gone through. But I wanted to see, you mentioned there's nothing you would hold back. So I know I know music was a big role. How did that help you? Could you dive in a little bit more with some of those challenges you briefly brought up with addictions and things like that, and how you got on that path?
Yes.
Eventually, how'd you get out of that self-destruction type of path and becoming a Christian?
Well, it was, it started early. I say this, and I may have even said that in your book, but Satan doesn't wait, right? I think sometimes we have this idea in our minds, because children are innocent, that Satan doesn't wait. I mean, or that Satan waits somehow to come after them until they're, old enough to understand. But I don't believe. I believe he comes after us from the minute that we're born. That he is seeking to devour from the onset, because of the value of our soul and what that means to him. And because of that, I mean, I look back and all of my early memories, the earliest memories I have a lot of great memories. I don't want to paint my childhood to be a completely negative experience, but the one black stain that's there, the one mark that really that stands out, is that my dad was an addict, and so I grew up. I don't think I can ever remember a time when my dad didn't have a beer open. That he was one of those guys that he would crack them at 10 o'clock in the morning, and he would drink all day. And and even then, I mean, he didn't act like a drunk per se, and so that becomes normal. You see your dad with a beer, and that's just normal. And he wasn't really acting out in any certain way because of that. But he would act out when he began to drink, liquor. He also was a marijuana smoker. And by the time we moved from South Georgia, a little small town in South Georgia, to Atlanta, Georgia, my dad got introduced to harder drugs there. And one of those would have been speed. It was, the early form of crystal meth. I think they were calling it crank then, because he worked the graveyard shift. So he worked from midnight to 6 every night. And so to stay up and function, that's what he would take. And that began to really have an effect on him. And so growing up around all that, it just seemed normal. It didn't seem out of the ordinary. But the prolonged use, my dad became very agitated all the time. He had always been a little verbally abusive with my mom and I. Not really so much my brother as much, but some. But with my mother-in-law kind of caught the brunt of it, and he that eventually gravitated towards more physical type abuse, and we left him in the middle of the night one night after he and I basically went toe to toe in the kitchen. I was in the 8th grade, and there was a situation that had happened, and I was just trying to leave, and he and I, got into a fist fight. And so my mother decided then it was time to go. And so we left him. And my dad also was, he had multiple affairs through this time. And so there was a lot of things going on already between he and my mother, but she was, I really believe, determined to try to make it work until it started getting physical. And then she knew that it was time to go. Mm-hmm. And but when we left, there was obviously a lot of pain associated with that, and not having a lot of supervision, and to things that I already deemed as normal. Drinking began at 14. When after we left, smoking marijuana began at 14, and that continued all through my freshman and sophomore year of high school. My sophomore year of high school, I started playing in a band with another friend of mine from school. I mean, musicians like that, tend to gravitate toward one another, and very similar home life experience. And so there's a lot common there, a lot of pain. And so playing, loud rock music was like a release, and we bonded in that. And so we started our band.
Let me ask you a question there real quickly.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting listening to you because I feel like we grew up in the same household. I know we're brothers in Christ, but I feel like we're connected a little bit more because my dad was an alcoholic. He was physically abusive.
Yeah.
We were on the run. We never got into a fist fight, but one night he had my mom pinned down to a couch. He'd been drinking. I was, I don't know, in middle school maybe. So there's not much I could do, but I went into the kitchen and grabbed a butter knife and screamed as loud as I could. We were living in an apartment, so we were on the second floor. So thankfully the people below us heard me and they called the police. So we were able to get out, but we stayed in a woman's shelter. So just hearing all of this, I'm thinking, man, this sounds very similar to a lot of the things that unfortunately I had to go through as well. But I'm certainly thankful that you were able to. And I definitely want to hear more about that. But I was going to ask you with the rock band, was part of that like being a release just because, and I'm no expert with rock bands and things like that. I know a couple of them like Metallica and some of the songs played in Iron Man.
Yeah.
But was the rock kind of music appealing because it was so loud?
Yes.
Or because it was like a more aggressive? Was that what was kind of drew you into it?
100%. It was being able to be aggressive and violent without actually touching anyone, And so as a teenage boy, anyway, when we're teenagers, we're aggressive anyway, It was an outlet to where, one of the things that I left out. My freshman year of high school, I failed. I failed the 9th grade because I got suspended 9 times for fighting, right? And a lot of that was me working through the anger and the absence of leaving my dad and all. And not, when you're 14, how do you deal with these? Are very very complicated situations that a 14-year-old mind can't process, and so they manifest in aggressive behavior. And if anyone said anything to me, to try to bully me because I had long hair and any kind of derogatory remarks, man, it was on, and we were going to fight. Even if I lost, I was determined that I was not going to let anyone mess with me because I felt like that's what my dad had set up, and I was breaking that model. I was not going to let anyone have power over me like that again. And so my freshman year, I had to do over, right? So I was supposed to graduate in 1991. I graduated in 1992. All right. I joke and I tell people that I was on the 5-year plan. But yeah, and so being in a band, we got to play this loud music, and I got to scream into a microphone, and it was a release of anger. It was almost like therapy, just in a very physical way, without actually having to, get in altercations with people.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly powerful, and I appreciate you sharing that. Do you and your father still have a relationship? Is he alive? What's that looking like now?
Well, he passed in 2013, but right after becoming Kelly and I became Christians in 2001. I was 28, she was 29. We had, up to this point, we had lived that rock and roll lifestyle. I graduated from high school. And like I said, as we started that band in high school and got into the club scene in Atlanta, started playing. So I'm 16, 17 years old playing in, bars all over Atlanta, Georgia. And we got hooked up with a booking agent and a management team, and they put us on the road for almost 3.5 years, playing 25 days a month. And so during that time, I mean, we're kids.
Yeah.
We're high school kids, in this very adult, environment where alcohol and drugs were easy to get, and we indulged very heavily. And so during that time, I met Kelly. We got married, and my addiction would kind of plateau and decrease a little. But then when life would get tough, that's what I ran back to, right? And so it was a cycle of up and down. And then finally, when we finally hit our bottom in that lifestyle at 28 and 29 years old, we became Christians. Her family are members of the church. Her brother-in-law is an elder in the congregation in Georgia, and they had always been very influential on us and pursuing us in that. And when it all kind of fell out and we became Christians, they were there. They were part of that process of us being taught, obeying the gospel, and then trying to work out all of our baggage, right, that we brought with us. And during that time, one of the things that I realized as we studied and I became more familiar with the truth, I realized that much of my addiction and choices were fueled by this anger that I still had for my dad. I held on to that for 14, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And by and large, that was what was hurting me, because I was still trying to hurt him the way that he hurt me, even though he wasn't present, right? And so I'm acting out in these ways. And then what would happen is I would start to feel it, and it would overwhelm me, and I just wanted to numb myself.
Yeah.
Not feel that. And so, and that kind of became my coping mechanism for everything. If I got stressed out because of financial worries, if I got stressed out because me and Kelly were having problems, if I got, that was my go-to, I would run to that. Well, I knew that part of the process of me getting sober as we had become Christians, and that's a whole other story too. We became Christians in 2001.
Okay.
I don't think I was completely sober until 2006, maybe.
Okay.
There was a process, right, of doing that. And part of that process was forgiving my father. And so we began having phone conversations. He had moved out to Arizona, and we began having phone conversations. And then finally, I think I was 32. And so we were able to get him on a plane to come out to visit us and to meet my wife. He had never met Kelly.
Wow.
And to meet his granddaughter. He'd never met my daughter, and so he comes out, and we were able to kind of talk through a lot of it and reconcile. And he really was a different man. He had been broken by his life choices. He realized that he had wasted so much, and that one of those things was the relationship with me, the relationship that I wanted so badly as a kid with my dad, I had now with my own kids, right? I had my own kids, and so that was fulfilling that need that I had all my life to have a relationship with my dad. Well, now I had that with my kids. And so I kind of didn't need him anymore. And that was a hard thing to admit to. And we reconciled. I can't say that we ever had a good relationship.
Yeah.
There was still tension. In a lot of ways, I felt really, really sorry for him because I could see the effects of it on him. And I loved him, but I didn't have the relationship with him that I think he wanted, later in life. And then he had a stroke and then another series of strokes in 2012 and 2013 and passed. And so when he died, we were on good terms. And I had learned how to forgive him. And I can look back at those times and be thankful, as part of the healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really powerful, and I really appreciate you sharing that. Again, it sounds very similar to my story as well. It wasn't like a father-son kind of relationship. We were able to reconcile. I was actually preaching at a small church in Urbana, Illinois, and I think part of my sermon was dealing with forgiveness. I had sat down with him at a Perkins restaurant, and really just poured everything out. I didn't use any profanity or anything like that, but clearly a lot of pain, a lot of anger, very similar to you. When I got angry, I would cry, which made everything worse because now people found me crying and I was angry, which made it, just kind of like kept building upon each other. But but that made me think about whether or not, had I forgiven him. And so that began some more conversations. But yeah, my dad died at the age of 59, pretty close probably to the year when your father passed away as well. So, one of the things for me with this podcast, I focus a lot on faith, family, fitness, and food. I have an 8-year-old son. You have children.
Mm-hmm.
What has that looked like? And I guess what wisdom or advice, there's a couple other things I want to ask you, but as a father now, I think about some of the kings in the Old Testament, how some of the kings had bad fathers that replicate, right? So we can either repudiate or we can replicate what we have been a part of. If it's something good, hopefully we replicate that. That doesn't always happen, but hopefully that's the path. So seeing or knowing your background with your father, what does that look like now for your children? I know that's probably been a huge influence of just going a complete 180, right?
Yeah.
With your interaction and things like that. Any wisdom, counsel that you'd give to parents or people who are listening to this who may have a similar story like yours?
Well, one of the things that I always said, right, all through my teens and 20s, is that I will never be like my dad, right? That was my, if there was a mantra to have, that was it. I was never going to be like him. I was going to love my wife. I was going to love my kids. I was going to do the right things, and I was going to be a good dad. I was determined, right? And I remember still the moment that I realized that I was becoming my dad.
How so?
Well, I was in my band, and Kelly and I had been married, and my daughter was just about a year old, or no, I'm sorry, she was older than that. She was probably closer to almost 2. And my band we played a series of shows, 3-4 nights in a row. And the last night was in Columbus, Georgia, and we lived in Atlanta. And so I was close enough to home that I was like, it's 2:30 in the morning. I can leave now and I can be home at 4. It's like an hour and a half drive. And I had, obviously, I was up, right? I had, drugs in my system, and having been up for a couple of days already, actually, even, so I was good to go. I was wired, right? And so I was like, I'm going to make it home. And in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to make it home because I'm a good dad. Not realizing that I'm going to make it home because I've got drugs in my system that are keeping me awake. It's got nothing to do with being a good dad. It was selfishly motivated, right? Yeah. And I remember walking in, and I'm beginning to come down as I'm driving home, and which was good because then I was like, I know I can sleep, then when I get home. And I walk in to our apartment, and our daughter's bedroom was the first room on the left. And I remember trying to be really quiet because it's after 4 a.m, between 4 and 5, I can't remember. And I look in her room, and she's standing up in her crib, right? Her crib had turned into a toddler bed where you just lower the mattress down, but she still has the rails up, And so she's standing up in her bed, and messy, She said, I looked right at her because she heard me come in, and so she's standing up waiting for me. She hadn't seen me in a couple of days, and immediately she sticks her little arms out for me to get her, and I couldn't, because I was like, I am too high. I've been up too long.
Yeah.
And what if some of this comes out of my skin and gets on her, or what if I drop her, or I was embarrassed for her to even see me because of the condition that I was in. And I realized as I was walking down the hall toward our bedroom, and she's crying for me, I was like, what a loser you have become. You have become just like him. And I knew then that something was going to have to change, that I couldn't go on like that. And it would be a few months later before that actually happened. But that was the kind of the beginning of it. I was like, I am becoming my dad. Mm-hmm. And so where I'm going with this is that from the moment that we began to change, I knew that I could renew that statement that I will never be like him because I'm changing today. That my daughter will never know me that way, right? I mean, she's 20 now. She'll be 21 in June. She's married to a wonderful guy, and she's turned out, just so incredibly good. Not to pat myself and my wife on the back, but that's what you hope for. That
absolutely.
And she's everything and more that I hoped that she would be, and that began because I determined that I was going to be the man in her life, that I was going to be the role model, that I was going to set the bar so high that whoever she marries is going to have to meet me there. And she did. She did that, and we couldn't be more happy with our son-in-law and who she picked. But it was a process that began with that decision of I'm not going to let that happen. That it was beginning to happen, and I realized it. And then it was the determination to then take advantage of every opportunity, to be the positive example, to make sure she never wondered if she was loved or not. One of the things that happened with my dad when he came to visit the first time, he was just enamored with my daughter, just blown away. He's a granddad, and he's looking at her, and she's beautiful and all these things. And he's watching her sleep. And he says to me, in the hallway, I was like, yeah, I look in on her sometimes too. And he said, man, she's sleeping like so soundly. He said, you guys never slept that good. And I didn't even think about it when I said it. It's rolled out. I said, yeah, well, she knows that she's loved. Mm. And of course, that made my dad cry. And I didn't say that to make him cry, but it was, and I went out and I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. He said, no, you're right. Right. He said, you're absolutely right. You guys didn't know that you were loved. And so that's a long way to say this, but the point is that we wanted to make sure that our kids knew that, number one, they were loved by God, that there was a God and that God loves them. Mm-hmm. And that their whole life would be about learning about that God loves you, that God will always love you, and that there's meaning in that. And then because God loves them, we love them too. And so establishing that relationship early on, the importance of knowing God and knowing that God loves us. There's never a time, even if she went to bed after getting in trouble or being grounded for something when she was a teenager or whatever, even if she go to bed mad, she knew she was loved. She knew that we loved her, and she knew that she was loved by God. And it's the same thing with our son now. Our son is 13, and it's the same. It's the same thing. The relationship is first, that you are loved above and beyond everything else, and they see that in the fact that we always eat dinner. We always, we go to every worship service. We don't skip for sporting events and that sort of thing. And, we've made that a priority. And so there's an understanding of normalcy and consistency. And that's all part of that love that is constant in our lives.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful. I think that's something good for all of us to, as parents, especially, and what you mentioned at the beginning of the show as well, that the devil never waits. Right. So with him sneaking in and influencing young people, I know that's a big problem for a lot of young people. They don't have that support. They don't have all the time, unfortunately, mom or dad or that guidance that you're talking about. So that's so critical. So I got to say a couple of things and ask you a couple more questions. First,
sure,
I want to say congratulations to you and Kelly. I saw on Facebook you guys hit 23 years of marriage. Is that correct?
23 years of marriage, 25 together.
25 years. That is fantastic. Yeah. So you're ahead of me and Nikki at this time. We're at 15. So I got to ask you, and I think our listeners would really benefit from this. I know you're big in evangelism. Evangelism is a big deal for me as well. I was on your YouTube page and I saw your talk from Luke chapter 24. Yes. I really like that about the simple things that we can do just following in the footsteps of Jesus.
Absolutely.
How and who was it that was able to share the gospel with you, get to the matters of the heart with you, to break through the music, the noise, the anger, the drugs? Who was that, and what did that look like? And the reason why I want to ask you that is it can be easy sometimes for people, not everybody, but it can be easy sometimes to see people living a certain way. And sometimes people can assume they're not going to listen to the gospel. They're not going to respond. They're way too far down that road. That wasn't the case for you. So walk us through what did that look like? Because I think that will help people who are listening as well, just reminding us about the power of Jesus Christ and His word.
Well, you know what? I'm actually really glad that you asked this, because it really kind of speaks to the power of the community, right? Because that's really what it was. The first people that were able to reach Kelly and I, but me specifically, was my brother-in-law, Mark Bowman, and his wife, Denise. This was Kelly's sister, Mark and Denise Bowman. Mark's an elder of the Mountain View congregation in Cumming, Georgia. And Mark and Denise had always been after Kelly and I. They had always been pursuing us, not in a overtly, or belligerent or like a salesman type way. I mean, they were just consistently showing us love, and they were consistently trying to help us, and it was true because of their example. When Kelly and I needed advice, that's who we talked to. Even though we weren't Christians, we knew that I was going to get better advice out of him than I was the guys in my band, right? I mean, I love the guys in my band. I'm still friends with those guys today. And, it's funny. While we're in quarantine, we've actually been recording new music via Dropbox. So,
oh, wow.
Just because we're bored and, we can. And so I'm still friends with those guys. But, when I wanted really good counsel, that's who I went to. I went to Mark. And, when Kelly and I kind of hit our bottom, that was who we went to. We went to Mark and Denise. Mark came to me. Kelly went to Denise, and they were able to talk with us about the situation and talk through it with us and convince us to both make the decision to attend a Wednesday night, assembly. Because at that point, I had exercised every option that I knew, and I'd still made a complete mess of our marriage. And so we agreed to meet, and once Mark got us there, it was a man named Brownlee Reeves, or as he affectionately goes by Brownie, that everyone that knows him. But Brownie Reeves was magnetic, man. It was he saw me when I came in, and now listen, I at this time I'm about 100 pounds lighter than I am now.
Okay,
right, and just bone skinny and jet black I mean, you think my hair's crazy now. It was like this everywhere, right?
I like your hair. I'm a little bit jealous, man.
And earrings in both my ears. Tattoos. I mean, I'm that guy, right? And so I was very apprehensive about even going, but I believed Mark's advice was good advice, and that even though at the time I was actually an atheist, I refused to believe anything because of my skewed worldview at the time, because of the drugs and so forth. So I agreed to go, really believing that I was going to be judged and that no one was going to talk to me and that I was just going to go in and go out and check this off my list and try to just go through the steps of getting things fixed. Well, Brownlee did not let us out of the lobby without agreeing to a study. I mean, it's like, man, he saw me. And he was honed in. And so when class was over and it was all done and we try to leave, he's there in the lobby.
So one of the things you're saying then is I want to interrupt real quick. One of the things you're saying is the importance of welcoming people. Don't make assumptions, even with the jet black hair or tattoos and things like that. A person who is there, who's walked into the building, talk to them and reach out to them.
That was it, man. I told Kelly later, I was like, you know what? I was like, I went in there fully expecting judgment and that sort of thing. And those people didn't care. They looked right past all that and they were just glad that I was there.
Had you ever experienced that in another church, or is that just some assumption you had just with your view of what Christianity was about?
Well, because in high school, I had a lot of friends that were, Christians, but they, they would still gossip and make, be judgmental about the things that I was into and all this stuff. Yet they would all show up at my parties on Friday night, right? And so there was a hypocritical view that I had of. I was like, oh, you guys are a bunch of hypocrites. You stand in judgment over me, but then you party with me. It's like, and so I kind of had that feeling going in that these people are going to be like everyone else, just a bunch of hypocrites that just want to make judgments about people. And no one did that. I mean, not that I know of. No one made me feel that way. I know that. And it was just this true community. One of the things that I wanted in a band was to belong somewhere. That's what I saw in band was a brotherhood. I mean, those three guys that I was in the band with, the four of us together, and then if you included our road crew and some of the other guys that traveled with us, we were like a gang. You know what I mean? If you fought one of us, you fought all of us. If you loved one of us, you loved all of us. And it was one of those things where it was belonging to something. And it was this sense of community. And I felt that at the Mountain View Church of Christ. I felt that from those people. They just pulled me in. They didn't care about any of my appearances. They just wanted to know. They didn't even care why I was there. They were just glad that I was. And it was it stayed with me to this day. And I stress the importance of that and how, Brownlee, wouldn't let me tell him no. He asked me, he said, you ever study your Bible? I'm like, well, I don't have a Bible. He goes, okay, I'll bring you one. How about tomorrow night? He just was not going to let me out of there without saying yes. And it was that persistence, not pushiness. He wasn't pushy at all, but it was a persistent, seeking. He was really interested in me. Not that he was trying to push something on me, but that he was interested in me. He wanted to know about me. He wanted to know about Kelly, and it was really evident that the guy cared. And I think that's that goes back to that old saying that they'll never know unless they know how much you care. And then a couple of weeks after studying with him, he was able to kind of answer all of my atheistic gotcha questions that I thought that I had, that most you hear pretty commonly, why does God allow suffering if he's a good God and all this, He was able to answer every bit of it from Scripture. I mean, never once did he open his mouth and say, well, I think, or whatever. He said, well, let's look at this. And he would push the Bible across the table and make me read it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was having to read the words. I've come to believe that no one has ever obeyed the gospel that hasn't read it for themselves. And that was part of that process of him making me read it. And after we were baptized, about a month later, then began this whole process of hospitality, where we were at someone's house every Friday night, Saturday night for a long time for dinner and discussion, or dinner and a study. We had a Sunday night Bible class that was going on for young couples. We studied with Brownlee on Monday nights, and then we had Bible class on Wednesday nights. And so there was really only about 2 nights a week that we weren't with other Christians. And then whenever we left there, a man named Jeff Harward stepped in. And Jeff was the man that eventually would really encourage me and inspire me to pursue ministry and preaching in general. And but it was, and so to answer your question, it was a lot of people. It was Mark Bowman and Denise Bowman. It was Brownlee Reeves. It was Jeff Harward. And it still continues to be. I mean, even 18, 19 years in to being a Christian, we became Christians in 2001. So this will be 19 years this year. It still continues to be Ben Lee, David Banning, Doy Moyer, so many people that I respect, that help and inspire me to stay on track, to keep doing what's right. And there's a passion that's there, but that passion is fueled when I see other people doing what I think is so important.
Yeah. Wow, that's really powerful. I wrote down, I think this is so good when it comes to evangelism: caring, welcoming, asking, studying, hospitality, then community. A lot of people. That's a powerful and biblical recipe for success in reaching lost people. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask, how does one who was an atheist, rock star, become a preacher full time? When did you decide? When did you know that you wanted to preach full time?
Well, it was weird the way it happened. So Jeff Harward, the man that kind of, we studied with Brownie for 4 years almost every Monday night. That was one of the things that really sticks out of my mind is that he didn't just rush us to baptism and then leave us there to drown. I mean, he studied with us every Monday night for almost 4 years.
Wow. To
make sure that we were getting grounded in solid doctrine, right? That we were understanding the correlation between the Old Testament and the sacrificial system and what that means in the New Testament with the sacrifice of Christ, and now the ongoing of the church. And so he really spent a lot of time with us, and I think that was so invaluable for me. And when we left Mountain View, there were several of us that lived far enough away that we wanted to start a new work. And so Mountain View helped us. They helped us form the Lanier congregation. We were over by Lake Lanier in North Georgia. And so there was about 6 families that began that work. And then we had, I don't know, over the course of the year, we had 7 or 8 other families that joined us, and we kind of built it up fairly quick. But Jeff Harward was one of the men. He was the father of one of the families that had moved with us, a guy named Aaron Harward and his wife Carla. They were still to this day, 2 of our very best friends. And so Jeff moved up from Middleburg, Florida to preach for us. And he was just electric. To this day, still, I think one of the best preachers I've ever heard, because he had a way that was just I call it real talk. Jeff preached real talk. He didn't have a preacher voice. Now he was a passionate and animated speaker, but he was very real about it. His approach was very hands-on almost, and you really felt like he was talking to you every sermon. And it was like every week he's looking into my life, and I'm like, how are you doing this? Well, that's just what the Bible does, right? And so he really inspired me. But Jeff also spent a lot of time with me. At the time, I was building homes, and so I had kind of a flexible schedule. And so Jeff would ride with me. I would go pick him up in the morning, and he would ride with me all day in my truck. And so I would make my rounds and check on job sites, And he was interested in all that, and too. But we would talk Bible, we would talk spirituality, we would talk, apologetics. We would talk all these things, and we talked a lot about fatherhood, and we talked about being a good husband and what those things look like. Because the father figure in my life was gone from an early age, and Jeff kind of filled that for me. He kind of gave me the fatherly advice too, as well as the spiritual counsel. And this was something that he and I did all the time. And so in 2009, he called me up one Friday. He said, "Hey, my doctor's appointment canceled. What are you doing for lunch?" I said, "I'm having lunch with you, man." And that was kind of our usual thing. We would go to this place in Atlanta, the Wild Wing Cafe. They had a wing buffet. And I mean, it was like
Nice.
$6, all the wings you could eat. And I mean, and we would just leave bones, man. It was carnage. We would go and we would eat wings and talk,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, so we're sitting there and we're talking. And I said, "Jeff, I said, I feel like," I said, "I've been a Christian now for 8 years. And I feel like I learned a lot from Brownlee. I've learned a lot from you. And I have all this life experience that I really think I might be able to help someone, if I were to, try." I said, "But, I'm not even teaching a Bible class. I give an invitation every so often. I've done a few Lord's Supper talks, but I've never preached a sermon. I've never taught a Bible class. I'm not doing anything." And Jeff looked at me, and he had this thing that he would do where he would pull his glasses off his face, and they would kind of hang off to one side, and he would kind of look at you over his eyes, and he goes, "Yeah." He said, "You're an idiot."
Oh no!
Back on and went back to eating, and I was
Eating the chicken wings, huh?
I was sitting there like, "What happened? What has happened here?" But I knew what he was saying. He was basically telling me, "Yeah, you're an idiot if you don't do something with this." That's on Friday. Saturday night, he and I had a phone conversation about something that we've been talking about previously, an issue that was going on there at the congregation. I'd become Jeff's sounding board for a lot of things. We didn't have an eldership, and so when we had problems and Jeff would want to talk, he would talk to me, and I would just keep all of his secrets. So it was I was privileged. I look back now and I see that was really a great privilege to be his sounding board. I realize now as a preacher, and how important that is, to be able to get things off your chest and to bounce things off of people and that sort of thing. And so, well, hey, I said, I'm glad that got worked out. I'll see you in the morning. Well, we got a phone call at 7:20 from his daughter-in-law, Carla, and said that Jeff had passed away. Mm. Just that he got up that morning about 6 and was kind of putting his thoughts together for his lesson, and came back and he sat back down on the bed and he looked at his wife, Star, that was her name, and she said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I don't think so." And she said, "What's the matter?" And he looked at her and said, "I love you." And he fell over. And it turns out he had a blood clot that lodged in his leg.
Wow.
And it killed him right then. And so we were all devastated. I mean, and surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, everyone still showed up for worship. We didn't have Bible class, obviously, but we showed up for worship. And all we did was sing songs, pray prayers. We took the Lord's Supper, and then we basically all just huddled together and cried for about 3 hours. And his wife is there, his sons are there. I mean, everyone's there, exactly where we were supposed to be. And that experience still sticks out of my mind. But after that, the men, we'd all gather together to find out what we were going to do. Are we going to try to find another preacher? Or are we going to just, what are we going to do? And I kept going back to Jeff looking at me over his eyes, and telling me, "You're an idiot. You're an idiot." And so the immediate need was someone to preach Sunday. And I was like, "I'm up." And it was kind of met with a little, I wouldn't say resistance, but like, "Keith, you've never preached. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm going to." And I preached that Sunday. And then I preached again the next Sunday. And then it just kind of became a regular thing where me and his sons and a few other men were in a regular rotation filling in. And And then I started filling in at other congregations around Atlanta that didn't have preachers. I would go and fill in their rotations. And we got invited to go to Florida College, Alabama camp in 2010. And I met some of the folks from Fultondale there and got to be good friends with them. And then in 2011, came back to camp, same thing. And got to give a devotion one night there. And some of the men from Fultondale asked me after that, they said, hey, would you want to come over and preach at Fultondale sometime? Our preacher's about to move back to California to take care of his parents. Would you be interested? I said, man, I would love to come over and preach one weekend. And so I did 2 times, and they offered me the opportunity to come and work here. And so I said a lot to say this, that until 2012, preaching full time was never on my radar. I was just going to do it because I told Jeff that I needed to do it. He agreed that I needed to do it. But the opportunity to preach full time somewhere was kind of a pipe dream because I was 39 years old then, right? I'm 39 years old. Who's going to, a guy who's never preached full time at 39 is not likely to end up preaching somewhere as a fully supported minister. And so it was It was a weird process that brought me here, but we've been here ever since, and it's been one of the best moves we ever made. Wow,
I did not know that part of the story with Jeff. I don't believe you shared that with me, unless I forgot that. That was a shocker. I was just thinking it was going to kind of be, step 1, step 2, step 3. But what a powerful story!
Yeah,
I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's just a good reminder of the impact friends and brothers can have upon one another.
That's right.
The urgency of doing things. I think with the quarantine, with the coronavirus as well, that's reminding us about there is a sense of urgency, and it doesn't a person getting into preaching full time. There doesn't have to be whatever the traditional path, whatever that path may look like. So the other thing, you said you were 39 in 2012. So that puts you at, I woke up at 11:45 last night. So I'm a little short on sleep. How old are you?
I'm 47.
I would have never thought you were 47 years old. You look good, man.
Well, hey, man, you got to lift, man. You got to
lift. Yeah.
That's the importance of
squats. With the time that we have left, let me ask you a couple more questions.
Okay.
What does your workout routine look like?
All right. So, that's funny. I just said squats. I actually don't do squats. I stopped doing. I had to stop working out legs in 2014 because I hurt both of my knees, and I think it was a process of hurting them. I don't think I hurt them at that moment. I think that was maybe that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I've been pretty hard on my knees all my life because, with construction work and the things that I was doing, I was on my knees a lot. And so, but in 2014, I'm at the gym. It's the day before we leave to go to camp. And so I'm getting my last workout in because for a week I'm not going to be able to work out the weights. I'm just going to be active at camp, and that has its own challenges as far as bodily exercise go anyway. And so I'm there, and I want to get a good leg workout in because it'll burn all week if I do it right. And so I was doing squats, and I go down, and both of my knees pop. And wasn't sure what it was. I put the weight back up on the bar and on the rack, and I thought, well, it's kind of tender, but it doesn't really hurt. Well, when I woke up the next day to go to camp, both knees were swollen like baseballs, and evidently I had destroyed some of the last bits of cartilage that I actually had. And so my workout routine now, because I'm very limited to what I can do with legs because I'm bone on bone in both of my knees. Mondays it's the universal chest day, so I stay with that pattern. But it's typically for a long time I was doing 3 sets of low rep, very high weight because I was trying to build strength and size, and I've gotten really into that. But now it looks a lot different. It's typically 4 sets of, instead of 6 to 8 reps of really heavy weight. I'm doing 4 sets of, 20 to 25 reps of moderate weight, trying to get more of a burn, because getting my heart rate up is still important. I've still got to get that cardio in, and I can't do it by running or jogging. Even elliptical is kind of hard. And so I try to get it in with my weight workouts. And so I do, I'll typically do 4 sets of 15 to 25 reps. And with chest, it's incline bench, flat bench, decline bench, and then flies. When I do back, it's typically, lat pull down, seated rows, dumbbell rows. I don't do deadlifts anymore, obviously. Then on Wednesdays, it's shoulders. And so that's going to be overhead press. It's going to be shoulder flies. It's going to be rear delt flies and front raises. And then a lot of times I'll take Thursday off, but if I do work out on Thursday, I'll do a second chest day. But I will change it up in some way, like either, I'll do a heavy superset of some sort. And then Friday is arm day, where it's a combination of bicep curls and tricep pushes, with the rope and dumbbells and that sort of thing. But every day it's 4 or 5 exercises for each muscle group, and I'll work out abs every day. Every day it's going to be planks and some sort of crunch or Roman chair or something with that. So but it's 5 days. I try to do 5 days a week. And I will tell you this: in the last few weeks, I have not been faithful. The last few weeks, schedule's been all messed up, and we've worked out here and there. My son-in-law and my son has gotten into it.
Nice.
He's 13 now, so he's wanting to kind of fill the shirt out, And so we started working out, but we've not been real faithful. It's kind of been all over the place. But no better time to get started again than right now. So
I know you've had fasting type protocols. Are you still fasting? If so, what's that look like in a 24-hour period? And are you taking any supplements? I'm asking this because I'm curious, and I'm always looking to see what other people are doing.
Yeah, I'm not fasting currently, but when I was doing it, the protocol was on Sunday is when I would begin. Since that's the first day of the week, it makes most sense. And basically Sunday, I'd eat lunch, I would eat dinner, I'd eat breakfast. Sunday, I'd eat all day, right? But I would eat whatever I'm going to eat for dinner is going to be done before 7 o'clock, right? So typically then, if I eat my last meal at 6, then I would fast 24 hours, and I wouldn't eat again until 6 Monday night. So I would do a full 24 hours to kind of shock my system and really kind of get the cleansing benefits of a fast, right? Where your body uses up every last bit of whatever's in there for energy. And it would, by about 2 o'clock, man, I mean, there was brain fog and there was all sorts of things happening. But if you push through, then when you finally got to eat at 6 o'clock, it was like the body resets and like you feel great after you ate that meal at 6. And then I would do, so it was 24 hours from Sunday to Monday. And then the next time I would eat would be Tuesday at noon. So it'd be 18 hours. Yeah. So I'd do 24, 18. And I would eat, at noon, and then I would eat again at 6. And then the next day was 12. I would eat, I'd eat my last dinner Tuesday night at 6. And then I would eat breakfast Wednesday morning at 6. And then I would eat lunch and I would eat dinner. And then basically kind of start over. Yeah. 24 hours, 18, 12. And so it was a 24, 18, 12. And I know that there's a lot of variations with that really work, where people just do, they'll eat from 12 to 4, or 12 to 5, and then not eat again until 12 the next day. And I think that's a good program too. It's probably more manageable than what I was doing. And so it's there are definitely some benefits. I mean, I felt better once you get used to doing it. It's hard to be faithful to that, because you do go through a period where you're so hungry. Your willpower is like you're a constant battle with yourself. So
very nice. 24, 18, 12. That's legit right there. I love to read. Do you have any book recommendations for me or for those who may be listening?
Well, I will tell you that I'm not much of a reader myself.
Okay.
That was one of those things that I never grew to love doing.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I have been actually going through this. He's about to get a plug here and didn't even know it. We have Chase Turner is a brother, and this is probably backwards on your thing, but the book is called Trials, and it's Trials, A Journey from Anxiety to Peace, and it's kind of a workbook book type combo. But it's especially right now with anxiety levels so high.
Tell us the author again.
Chase Turner.
Chase, Chase.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that on Amazon, or where can people find it?
He sent me this. He sent me a message on Facebook, but I believe you can. Yeah, I believe you can find it on Amazon.
Okay, so it's called Trials, A Journey from Anxiety to Peace by Chase Turner. Okay.
Yes. And it's like I said, I'm not much of a reader, but this is a very easy read, and it's very practical. I wish that I actually was a reader. To be honest with you, I find myself a little envious sometimes because even my son he's an avid reader. I mean, he read the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. At 11 years old, he read those.
Mm-hmm.
He read all the Harry Potter books. I mean, he's very avid reader. And I wish that I could dive into a book like that, but I'm cursed with two things. I have ADD.
Okay.
I have a hard time sitting still and getting focused on something for a long amount of time. And I also suffer from dyslexia. It's not extreme, but it's enough that if I read for a longer period of time, it does give me a headache.
Yeah.
And so I have to read in short spurts, and that's why, I mean, even with my Bible readings, I'll read a couple chapters and then I'll stop. And then I'll go back later and I'll read a couple chapters and then I'll stop.
When you preach, are you preaching basically from memory? Are you taking notes up there? Something that I'm beginning to work on is, I will write my sermons out. The one I just recorded for this weekend, when I recorded it, it was just me, my Bible, and my cell phone. So, I know there's some guys out there that don't use notes or take them up there. So that's something I've been trying to work on with some of the conditions you were talking about.
Yeah.
Are you taking notes up there, or
I do.
How do you do that?
I do. I'm important, and that was one of the things that was always so impressive about Jeff Harward. Is there were times Jeff wouldn't decide what he was going to preach on until he was walking.
Oh wow!
But then when you've preached for 25 years, you have that kind of ability, right? And he would get up there and he would open his Bible and he would kind of, welcome everyone and that sort of thing. And then you could see he would kind of pick a direction and he would just go. And they were never, they weren't like rabbit hole type sermons where he would just kind of run off in some tangent. They were well put together, well thought out. I mean, you would even have 3 points and that sort of thing. But the guy never had anything but his Bible, and I was always so impressed with that. But for me, number one, I'm just not that smart. So, but I do take notes, and what I do is I will actually write out like a manuscript of everything that I want to say.
Okay.
And then what I do is the main points in each paragraph, I will bold type those, and then I will make an outline. And that's what I take to the pulpit with me. I write a transcript so that I remember what I want to say, but then I take the outline to the pulpit. And if you ever watch any of my live streams, there are times when I'm standing there at the pulpit and that I'm sticking hard to the outline. And there are times when I'll walk away from it when you know that something has triggered a thought or inspired me, and I kind of go away from it. But but I definitely I wish that I could preach without notes, and I've done it a time or two. I've done it like at camp we have to give devotions, and there's no podium, there's nothing to set anything on. You're just up there talking. And so you have to. And so you're basically running on memory. And I wish I could do that every Sunday. Unfortunately, I'm just not at that level yet. That's something to aspire to, though, for sure. Yeah. That's something I can't do.
I can do. I can do, and so can you. Well, I tell you what, this has been really good for me. I'm just looking over my notes a little bit. I really appreciate your passion, your heart for God, your willingness to talk about your past and just what God has done for you. I know sometimes that's very challenging. We've covered quite a bit of territory with family and with friends and just the relationships, but I'm hoping that this will help other people, and I'm hoping that this will be a benefit. It certainly has been a benefit to me. I see a lot of similarities between the two of us with our fathers, with our children, what we're striving to do.
Yeah.
I just want to, we have to wrap it up here, but I just want to get a couple more thoughts here, and this will just take a couple of moments.
Yeah.
Number one, where can people find you?
Well, obviously my Facebook page is public, so you can search Keith Stonehart on Facebook. You can also find our YouTube channel, the Fultondale Church of Christ YouTube channel, where we live stream our services there.
Say the church name again.
Fultondale Church of Christ.
Okay.
That's FULTONDALE.
Okay.
And then also the Fultondale Church of Christ Facebook page, where YouTube typically will stream the entire service. With Facebook, we only put the sermons on there. And so if you search my name, they'll usually pop up there, coinciding with the Fultondale Facebook page. And you can also go to our website, fultondalechurchofchrist.net, and find those sorts of things there. And if you're ever in North Birmingham, man, come and visit. Come see us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And eventually, you and I are going to get together and have a workout, man.
I know we should have done it last year with the quarantine. We waited way too long, but we'll definitely have to do that. Final thought here: if you had an opportunity to talk to a young person, maybe someone is listening to this, what would you want them to know?
Oh man, that's such a large question, and I think that the only way to truly answer is for them to know that they're not worthless. I think sometimes we live in a society that's very materialistic, and so much so that kids base their worth on their status in life, and most of the time that has nothing to do with them, right? If they're in a lower financial bracket, that's not their fault. That's the situation that their parents were in, and that's not even say that it's a bad thing. Some of the best lessons that I learned in life was when we didn't have anything. But I think that there's a lot of our culture bases worth and value on that sort of thing, or maybe they're not a talented athlete, or maybe they're not talented musically, or maybe they don't know what their talent is yet. I mean, it takes a lifetime sometimes to figure those things out.
Yeah,
I thought I'd ever become a preacher. I mean, it took me 40 years almost to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so I would say that they're not worthless, and that they are loved, even if their home life has not been what it should be. That there's a God and that He loves them. And I can look back on my life and all the times where it was very evident that Satan wanted me. The fact that he doesn't have me now tells me that God was always there waiting for me. And I think He waits for all of us, like the Father of the Bible, and so that establishes our worth in Him, and it establishes our value in Him, and the love that we understand comes from Him. And so,
if you had a quick thought for fathers, what might that be?
Fathers, love your wives. The best model that we can set out for our kids is for them to see us love our wives. That establishes early the model. When my daughter was getting married, she talked a lot about how she determined the type of man that she would look for. And she said that it was because she said, Dad, she goes, you and Mom love each other. I wanted that. It established a model with her where she wanted what we seemed to have. Now, that's not to say that mine and Kelly's marriage was perfect, because it was not. And it obviously had problems. But what she saw was love, because there was effort from both of us. There was determination from both of us, and there was faith from both of us in loving God more than one another. And so I would say the best thing we can do for our kids as fathers, love their mothers and let them see that.
Very powerful. One last question for couples who may be listening to this, couples who may be going through challenges. 23 years is a long time for you and Kelly. You've been through a lot. What short piece of advice, wisdom would you give to couples? Maybe even the couples who may be going through some difficult days.
That time truly does heal. And so put your faith in that. God gave us time. I don't think as simply just a circumstantial way to keep up with ourselves, but time heals. And so when you're going through tough moments, just know that it'll pass, and that no matter the hurt you feel today, when you both have put God first, you'll follow the examples that He gave for forgiving one another as Christ forgives us, and that let time do what it does. Let time heal, and trust that. Trust the process. God knew what He was doing, and we just have to trust it.
Amen. Thank you, Keith, for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story. Very powerful. So I will put together some notes for those who will listen to this, where you can be sure to find the website and the book that you mentioned. Keith, take care and God bless. I appreciate you, brother.
Love you too, brother. Keep at it.
All right. Take care.
All right.
For those who are listening, thank you for tuning in. And remember, I can do, and so can you.